evening, everyone. Tonight's shiur is called The King and I, Becoming the King of I, Part 2, and the final of this series. Just a quick recap. In last week's parasha it says, Shofetim v'shoterim titen lecha bechol sha'arecha. Judges and officers you shall appoint for yourself. The singular is used. In the Hebrew we have the singular and the plural. And that prompts the sages to say, not only are the Jewish people commanded to appoint judges and officers, but judges and officers to ourselves, to the individual as well, which means that a person has to be able to discern in his gates, in his openings, the mouth, the eyes, the ears, to decide and to discern what to say, when to say, to who to say, to be able to decide what to absorb into our lives, what to see, what is acceptable, not acceptable, not to just see what other people are doing and that's acceptable to me and imitate that, etc., etc. And so to what to hear, what to accept. If someone speaks ills of another person, not to accept that for face value, etc., etc., etc. In the same vein, in the parasha it also says, Som tasim alecha melech. Appoint for yourself a king. Again, the singular expression is used, which prompts our whole shiur to base it in a similar vein that the sages said, just as you need to appoint for yourself the individual, judges and police, so too, or officers, so too must you appoint for yourself a king. What is a king? A king means to say that the Almighty has created man with particular ingredients, and that is the three main dimensions which defines us, and that is our thoughts, our emotions, and our action, which corresponds to the brain, the heart, and the kidneys, as we said before. Liver, I beg your pardon. Yeah, someone stopped me there with kidneys last time. The liver, beg your pardon. Very good. Which correspond to the three facets of the soul that is enclosed within the body. Neshama, in the brain. Ruach, in the heart. And the nefesh, the lowest. Ki hadam hu hanefesh, for the dam, the blood, represents the nefesh, represents the living being, the living soul, and that is in the kaved, in the liver. So we went on to explain those three parts of the soul, how the neshama is the highest part, and that is why it resides predominantly in the brain, and for this reason, man was born with an inherent quality of controlling, through the brain, controlling his heart, controlling his emotions. You can even control your mood. How much more so your actions, what you do. You can decide what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and govern your life in accordance with that. And we said that predominantly because the neshama is enclosed within the mind, the intellect, and the moach, so predominantly the brain or the mind is pristine, is more pure, unless we taint it. But in its core, it is much more spiritual, much more above the material. Then we move down a step, and this is the essence of man we began to speak last week. The essence of man is in the heart. Why is that? Because if the brain is pure, where then lies true free choice? In a person's will or desires. And that is in the heart. What's interesting to note that although man is, if I were to ask you, what is the greatest thing about man? What is the greatest part about man? You would all say, the mind, the brain, the ability to think, to ponder, to create with the mind, etc. But what's interesting to note is that's not necessarily the Torah's perspective. It is, of course, to a certain degree. But the Torah's perspective, if we have a look at the Torah, when God created man, Vayitzer et Adam, Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et Adam, Afar min ha'adama, and then it says, Vayipach ba'apav nishmat hayim, and he blew within his nostrils the breath of life. Vayihi lenefesh hayah, and he became a living being. When God breathed in his nostrils the breath of life, he became a living being. Notice how it says, and we discussed this in previous shurim, it says he breathed within him the breath of life. And the Zohar says, Man danafach mitoch yanafach, he that blows from his innards. We discussed this before, that man is different from all other creatures, that all other creatures were created by the saying or the utterance of God. Let there be this, let there be that. God said, let there be light. Now we know there's a big difference between speaking that takes barely any energy than blowing. Blowing is from your insides, it takes a lot of energy, it's more of an expression of the inside. So the Zohar prompts to say that there's a big difference between all of creation and man. Man was created from the very inside, so to speak, of God. And if we were to take that a step further and see that we are created in the image and in the likeness, there is different opinions of what the sages say, which image and which likeness we were created. Some commentaries say the intellect, that man has the ability to create like God. Others say free choice. The ability to have free choice. That predominantly lies in the heart. And we'll soon see in a minute. So there, Vayil nefesh haya, and he became a living being. The Targum explains that to be, he became a speaking being. He defines the living being. In other words, what defines man's life? What defines his life and who he is, the essence of who he is, his ability to speak. That defines man. So it's interesting. You would think that what defines man is his intellect. And as I mentioned before, according to some great scholars, the Rishonim, there's a debate. In which way we were created in the image of God? Of course, not in a physical image. God has no physical image. So according to some commentaries, we were created in the image of God, means to say the ability to think and create with our minds novel ideas. I mean, who but a human being can create Hamim and Mahasha and all of these wonderful, wonderful human creations? Unbelievable. Put a bit of garam masala, this much, not too much. But according to others, and of course, the Targum Onkelos, what defines man is his ability to choose. And where is this concept of choice? Where does that lie? In one's heart. And as we mentioned on many occasions, speech is very much related to one's emotions. The Kabbalists teach us that each part of our soul, lower for higher, is connected to a lower and a higher part of our body. As I said, the nefesh, the basic life force, the living soul, is connected to the kaved, to the liver, because the liver is associated with the blood, and the blood is the most that defines what life is all about, the most physical. Then we go a step higher. The ruach, the spirit, that is enclosed in the heart. And the heart is associated with the breathing apparatus. It's higher than the liver. And I mentioned before, it's associated with the heat of the breath. That comes from the heart. There's an interrelationship between the breathing and the heart, which is a step higher. And we see, therefore, the emotions which are embedded in the heart is associated with speech. So and also we learned before on many occasions that when a person speaks, it arouses his emotion. Like we find Shulchan Aruch, in fact. Kol me'orer kavanah. One's voice, when one articulates one's words in prayer, when one sounds his voice and he hears his voice, it arouses one's emotion much greater. When you say it silently, it's not the same, but when you hear these words, it has a greater impact on us. It moves us much more. I know it happens to me in my own prayers. When you articulate it, when you say it out, or when you hear yourself say it, it affects us. Because something very unique about speech that is very much related to emotions. So when Onkelos or the sages say that it's speech that defines man who he is, it means emotion or our will. And what's unique that you don't find by other parts is this duality to the emotions or to the heart. And this is what we mentioned briefly last week. For example, the concept of Ruach HaKodesh, the spirit. Remember, the spirit is associated with the heart. The neshama with the brain, the nefesh with the kaved, with the liver. So the ruach, the spirit, we find many expressions that go both ways, for good or for bad. For example, Ruach HaKodesh, divine spirit or divine intuition. Ruach HaTumah, the spirit of impurity. Ruach Shtut, the spirit of folly. As the Gemara in Masechet Sotah says, that en adam hote ela im nichnas bo ruach shtut. A person doesn't sin only if the spirit of folly enters him and convinces him that, nah, it's okay what you're doing, you're still attached to God, you're still holy, you're still this, you didn't do anything, you've made no dent on your soul, you've made no dent, no difference to this world. It's a spirit of folly that convinces us, Odenu beyahaduto, as Admor HaZaken writes in Tanya, Odenu beyahaduto, you're still holy, you're still holding by your Judaism, so to speak. You did nothing wrong. It's not such a big deal. God will forgive you. It's not a matter of God forgiving or not forgiving. It says, "V'Yaakov hevel nahalato." Jacob, his inheritance is like a rope. What makes a rope strong? The individual strands. You cut off an individual strand. Yes, the rope is still attached, but it's weakened. So too, the strand of Jacob, the rope of Jacob is made up of 613 different strands, 613 different commandments. It is a disservice to your own rope or your attachment to the source of life, to godliness, if we weaken those strands. We are fooling ourselves if we think that the rope is just as strong as it was before. So it is a spirit of folly that convinces us that it's okay, that we make no dent or no impact on the world. No, man is so important that all of our actions make a great, great difference to the whole world, not only to ourselves, not only to our whole families. Similarly, we have a concept called Shfal Ruach, someone who's very lowly and humble in spirit. We also have Ruach Gevoha, someone who has a very big opinion of himself, or a very arrogant spirit. Ruach Kina, a spirit of jealousy, has engulfed this individual and he's now jealous, and etc. So we see that the concept of Ruach, as opposed to the brain that is more pure and pristine, has a duality to it. And as we said, Vayitzer Hashem Elokim, Vayitzer is spelled, and God created man, is spelled with two yuds, indicating to us that there is a duality to that which defines man. And that is the greatest quality that we have. Of course, the brain is great and noble and pure and unbelievable, to such an extent that it is fitting that the soul, the highest part of the soul, the neshama, is enclosed or resides there. But really what defines us is our ability to choose right from wrong, light from darkness, and that is the heart. How is that? How do we achieve that? Through the mind, through understanding what's right, through exercising the mind's power of controlling the emotions and choosing right from wrong. And this is what we outlined last week. Som tasim alecha melech, proclaim and make for yourself a king, in the singular means that the Almighty has endowed us with three parts that make us who we are. And in order to be able to fulfill our role in this world, to be the epoch and the apex of creation, to be the king of creation, every individual must exercise this power that the Almighty has endowed us with. And as we said, the word melech corresponds to moach, lev, kaved, in that order. Which means that the brain controls the heart, and that in turn inspires and controls the most physical part of us, the kaved, the liver, or the blood, or that which is most material, food, and living, and eating, and breathing, and all of that stuff. In that order. And it must be in that order. And if it's not in that order, then it's a disaster. Then we are not fulfilling our role. Then we are not the melech that God proclaims that we should be, and that we have the potential for. Now, what happens if you reverse the order? What happens if a person follows just his heart's desires? Now we know that the heart has two parts, the Yetzer Tov, the Yetzer Hara. That's why it says Vayitzer, plural. Vayitzer, two Yud, Vayitzer, God formed. That extra Yud implies that we have two inclinations, Yetzer Tov, Vayetzer Hara, the positive inclination that induces us and convinces us to do the right thing, what's good, desire to want to attach ourselves to spirituality, etc., etc., or the more physical, the desires, the pleasures, the passions, etc., etc. What happens if we reverse the order? What happens if we just follow the dictates of our heart? And that we, so to speak, force the mind to tag along, to follow along? What happens if we force the mind to be subdued? Because don't forget, we learned before, the highest power of man is his koach haratzon, his will. Nothing stands before will. En davar omed bifnei haratzon. Nothing stands before his will. Even the mind, even the intellect. So strong is the mind that it in fact can bypass the natural weakness of man. If a person really desires to understand something, but he was not endowed with the intellectual ability to do so, but he really desires with all of his heart to understand a portion of the Torah, if he really desires it, that desire, that will, that ratzon, which is above the mind, which the Kabbalists call keter, the crown, it's above the mind. The crown rests above the mind, can even bypass the mind. But God forbid that we should bypass the mind in a negative way, in a lower way. We should always bypass the mind in a higher way to be able to, our will and our desire even goes beyond the natural capacity and quality of the mind, and even the neshama can go even beyond that. And that's the power of faith. That's the concept of faith that is supernatural, that is beyond intellect, and that's not for today's shiur. But the concept of will is very much associated with the heart, with the desires, with how we want to live and lead our lives. God forbid it should never be that our will harness or force the mind to follow its dictates. And the mind simply becomes an adjunct, a supplement to the heart to do what the heart wants. So much we bamboozled the mind, so much we've convinced the mind, so much a spirit of folly has induced and convinced the mind to follow the dictates of the heart. And if we do that, then we've reversed the order somewhat, and we become the lev. We take the lev and we give preeminence to the lev, to the heart. The emotions is the most important. And again, with the emotions and with the heart can come sometimes good things, sometimes bad things. That's no longer a melech. That spells lemech, which means a clown, a fool. Because then a person governs his whole life with the spirit of folly. Whatever I feel like. Well, I'm up to putting on tefillin today, I put on tefillin. I'm not up to it, I won't put it. I'm not in the mood, I won't put it on. I'm in the mood of giving charity, I'll give. I'm not in the mood, I'm in the mood of being achzar. How do you say achzar? Cruel, I'll be cruel. That's a fool. Because we have to maintain self-control. That's a melech. A melech is someone who has self-control. Not someone, God forbid, who is a lemech, who is a clown. But it goes deeper than that even. Before we go to the next stage and the next step, I want to be able to speak a little bit about Rosh Hashanah as a day of judgment. What happens on Rosh Hashanah as the day of judgment? Why is it that we are judged? So the sages tell us that the system of just judgment is similar to a normal court of law. A normal court of law, you have a person who sinned, he's the Baal Adin, he's the plaintiff. And then you have his lawyers, his advocates that advocate on his behalf, that try and justify and try and find the right excuses, mitigate his sin, or totally abolish his sin by saying there's no evidence, it's not him, or he was forced to it because of this, because of that, he was compelled, or he didn't really mean it, he didn't really know, or whatever the case may be. And then the prosecutors say, hang on a minute, here's the evidence. Hang on, we've got the evidence, here's the evidence right here. He left his stamp there, he left his DNA. Today, you leave your DNA, that's it. I just heard on the radio that they caught someone who broke into a person's house because he left his cigarette butt. And they caught the DNA, they matched, I didn't hear the whole story, but through the DNA, the cigarette butt in one place, and they matched him and whatever, and they fixed him up. You left your evidence there, you left your DNA, you left your imprint there. The greatest impact, the greatest effect will be the pleading of the individual himself, of the plaintiff. In Judaism, most definitely like that. For this reason, the Sanhedrin, the men of the great Beth Din in Jerusalem, the Dayanim, the judges had to know 70 languages, because how can you hear a person pleading for his life through an interpreter? You got to hear his feeling, his emotions through the words. You hear his sincerity. You can't hear it through an interpreter.
How many languages?
What? 70 languages.
70?
Yeah. So the judges had to speak Singapore. For sure. What? No, it's a different sort of type of English. Because you have to understand there's the style and the linguistic, qualities to it. Similarly, in this vein, is Rosh Hashanah. But there's a big difference here. The big difference is that on this day, we are continually being judged, not on Rosh Hashanah. Every single day, we have to justify our existence. Furthermore, not only we have to justify our existence, we have to justify our role as Jews that we were given. Ultimately, Yaakov, Esav, despised the birthright, despised what the birthright represented. The birthright represented a particular position in the household of Yitzhak, the continuation of Abraham. He wasn't interested in all of that. So Yaakov, because he desired the spiritual qualities of what the birthright represents, we continue to have to justify. I one time said, it's a beautiful interpretation, I saw the two angels that come on Kiddush, on Friday night, to the house. They escort the man from the synagogue. One of them is Malach Michael, who always advocates good for the Jewish people, seeks their good. And the other one is the angel of Yishmael. Why? He wants to see. You guys wanted the Shabbat. You guys fought for the Shabbat. So let's see how you're keeping the Shabbat. And if indeed you're keeping the Shabbat properly, and if indeed there is sanctity and holiness in the home, then the angel of Esav is forced to agree to the blessing of Michael that says, let next week also be like this. They are deserving, they have earned their place. And he has no choice but to say, Amen. Yes, I agree. They are deserving of the blessings of Yitzhak. Because don't forget, Yaakov took the blessings of Yitzhak, rightfully so, because Esav wasn't interested in the birthright. You can't not be interested in the birthright and want the blessings. You can't have it both ways. So you want the blessings? You have to earn it. Yaakov earned it. It was his. He earned it in many ways. We continually have to justify that. Similarly, the Almighty created a world. He's given us a role to be a melech in the world, to be a king, to exercise the power of the soul over the body, the spirit over the material, to be a melech, to be a king over the world, to be a king over our own lives. This is what the Almighty has charged us with. We have to justify that. All of these things, all of the whole world, you know how complex the mechanism of this whole world was created? The infrastructure was created just for us. You have to justify it. So comes Rosh Hashanah, what happens? Comes Rosh Hashanah, and there is a judgment. So, who are the advocates? Who are the lawyers? And who are the prosecutors? You know who they are? You know what their names are? Our good deeds and our bad deeds that we ourselves created. Every deed that we do creates a force, an energy. And that comes before the Almighty. And therefore the good deeds say, look what this guy did. Look what this lady did. Look how kind she was. Look how he wanted to do this and he overcame his natural inclination and didn't do it. Look how sensitive this lady was. Look how charitable. Look how much good they make in the world. And then the bad energy that we ourselves created comes before the Almighty and says, what justification is there for this person to have the blessings that you give him? He did this and this. How do you know? What do you mean, how do I know? I was there. I was with him. The Gemara says that the Yetzer Hara, hu ha-Satan, hu ha-Malach ha-Mavet. The evil inclination, the one that comes up to you and says, come on, mate. Come here, pal. Puts your arm around you and says, come on. Seinfeld is on tonight. Let's not go to the shiur. Yeah, you can always hear it on the internet. You won't, but you know that. But you'll always hear it on the internet. There's plenty of other shiurim. Rabbi Shriki rambles on anyway. What do you have to hear? You don't have to hear it. No big deal. What's he going to talk about already? He's going to talk about Judaism. I know Judaism. So he puts his arm around you, he's your best mate. And you decide not to go. Comes Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Shriki didn't go to the shiur. How do you know? What do you mean I convinced him? So he becomes now the prosecutor. And then he enacts the judgment as well. These are the actions that are brought before the Almighty. They judge us. We judge ourselves. Our own actions judge ourselves, whether we are justified in having another year or given the qualities and the blessings to be able to be given another chance, to be able to fulfill our role in being a melech. So it is our very own actions that judge us, nothing else. The energy, the positive or negative that we create, stand before the Almighty and judge us. In this vein, let us now go to the famous story that you all know. Remember Bilam? Bilam had a power. Now the king of Moab, Balak, knew that this guy had a power to curse. They come along to him and they say, come on, we'll pay you a lot of money if you curse the Jewish people. We're worried, they're numerous, the kids just came out of Egypt, look at what happened in Egypt. Bina, v'nechisat en haaretz. Look how many there are. Go and curse them. Does Bilam have any power to curse? Or any power to bless? Who has a power to bless? Who has a power to curse? It all comes from the Almighty, no? He tells them, I can't curse anybody that God doesn't want me to curse. I can't bless anybody that God doesn't want me to bless. He tells them straight out. So why are they coming to him? Because Yodea Da'at Elyon. He knows something that happens up there in heaven. The Gemara in Brachot, Masechet Brachot tells us, he knows the right time when to arouse God's attribute of judgment upon people. Why? Nobody can, God forbid, curse us. Nobody but ourselves. Nobody can arouse strict judgment upon us but ourselves. Now, we know that the Almighty is all merciful, but there are times that the attribute of God's judgment seems to be predominant or seems to be revealed, because ultimately the attribute of justice demands that there is justice in the world. A person rebelled against God, the King of all kings. People have to learn. You don't just sin and prosper. The attribute of justice demands that there is justice in the world. That is one of the systems and the mechanism for the world to function normally, properly. Reward and punishment is there in order to be able to allow for us to function normally. Otherwise, let's look at a normal kingdom. We enact laws. If everybody does what they want, gets away with it, then what happens? Lawlessness. So there's two attributes. You sinned, you transgressed, that's bad, you should get punished for that. Number one. Number two, people have to see that there is a law, that there is a system of justice. If people see that this person goes unpunished, unchecked, then this will rot away all of society. Bilam knew the moment, so to speak, when God's attribute of justice is aroused. That he knew. I.e., perhaps, when a person is not behaving appropriately, when a person is doing an act that is not appropriate, the attribute of the divine justice is aroused by us. In other words, we are creating the divine justice at that very moment. Bilam knew when it happens. And therefore, he would seek to prosecute that individual and demand that justice be served. After all, did you not, Almighty God, create a system of justice? Did you not, Almighty God, create the concept of reward and punishment? Enact what you yourself created. So Bilam has no power to curse. All he can do is prosecute against someone who sinned, someone who did wrong, and rightfully so to speak. So we create the attribute of justice. We arouse God's judgment as opposed to God's mercy and kindness. We can also equally arouse God's mercy and kindness as well. That's what happens on Rosh Hashanah to a certain degree every single day. So the Gemara asks, so to what extent does God arouses his anger, his judgment? How many times a day? Is it 5 hours? Is it 6 hours? Is it a split between 12 and 12? There's 24 hours in a day. Is it 12 hours kindness and 12 hours? Or is it dependent upon the individual? The Gemara says, Rega kememra. Rega, an instant. What is that instant? How do we measure? How do we know what it is? How much is an instant? Is it a minute? Is it a second? Is it 10 seconds? So the Gemara says, Rega kememra. As long as it takes a word to say Rega. So the Gemara asks, so what can Bilam already say? The prosecutor, he needs time to be able to say, look, we got the DNA, He's got to say, look, God, you got the DNA, you know what he's done, it's before you. The DNA, he created the DNA. He created the negative force that's before you. You got to have a bit of time to present the case. So the Gemara asks, what can he already say? What can Balaam say to arouse God's severity or justice? So the Gemara says one word. He only needs to say one word. Kalem. Finish them off. Destroy them. What's so significant? How does that one word have a power? How is that a prosecution against the Jewish people? Destroy them, finish them off. You want to be able to come along and say, listen, Almighty, they sinned. They created negative energy. The whole point of creation is to reveal godliness, and they caused that there should be more bad in the world. They should cause that there should be more darkness and concealment of God in the world. That's the exact opposite of what your intention. It takes me a minute or two to explain, does it not? Yeah? So what? There's a magic word. The word is kalem, finish them off. So let's understand. Remember the story. He didn't curse them where he was. He said, okay, he went to travel to where the camps of the Jewish people were. And he looked from this vantage point, and he tried to uncover some negative quality, some indecency about the Jewish people. No, can't curse them. Well, can you maybe go over here? Well, prepare me an altar, prepare me sacrifices, and I'll sacrifice to God, and I'll see. What's he looking for? What's the story? He goes from one place. What's he skipping and hopping from one place to another place? He's looking spiritually from different ways and vantage points. What can he see bad about the Jewish people to then prosecute them and say, God, look what they're doing. This is the nation that you've chosen. This is the nation that you've given them the Torah. Look how they're behaving. They received it from you. The nation that you took out of Egypt and you made so many miracles, this is how they're behaving. That's why he's looking through vantage points. Different vantage points. He was ultimately looking for some immoral act. He blessed them ultimately. And he said, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov mishkonotecha Yisrael. How goodly is your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. And Rashi tells us, from the blessing, you know already what he was looking for. He was looking for immorality. He blessed the tents. He saw their privacy, how they lived, how they were moral, how they were modest. How every opening of one tent did not face the other one. They respected people. They respected people's privacy. They respected their own privacy. They were moral. They were just. They were decent. They were respectful. They weren't promiscuous. That's what he was looking for, but he couldn't find it. That's why he told Balak, go and lure them to immorality, and that will cause their downfall. Which he did. And which caused a plague amongst the Jewish people, which Pinchas stopped. And we spoke about Pinchas before. So let's get back to Bilam. What did he try and uncover here? How did he try and curse the people? By saying a magic word, kalem? That's the magic word? Ladies and gentlemen, it is. Let's see how and why. Now let's spell the word kalem. Chaf, lamed, Mem. Exact opposite of melech. So when a person does worse than lemech, worse than a fool or a clown that is governed by the dictates of his heart, he's actually governed. The whole order of melech, of king is reversed, which means to say he follows the crass and most base desires and pleasures of life. All he's interested in is like the blood, the most base and crass of who we are and what we are. And that influences the heart, his desires, and then that controls the mind. That's all he thinks about, and he uses the mind how to achieve and to get what I want. As opposed to using the mind how to control and how to be above, how to live below and live and exist in the heavens. The exact opposite. He uses and abuses the mind to be able to feel and achieve and want his desires and pleasures in the most lowest part of who he is. What does the word kalem mean? Destroy them. Finish them off. Who can finish? Can Bil'am do it? No. Only we ourselves. Our own actions. How we live our lives will dictate whether we are in control or whether we have lost control and we have totally lost, God forbid. So that is what Bil'am was trying to see and look and search for. Have they reversed the order? Kalem. Are they living a life of Kalem or Melech? When he saw Melech, couldn't do anything. They're in control. But if he would see, God forbid, the reverse order, then Kalem. Kalem means finish them off. When we put the Kaved, the Lev and the Moach, that order, when we give preeminence to the Nefesh, to the base living, to the blood, to the most lowest and crass of existence, then at that moment we have lost control. However, not all is lost. Nothing stands in the way of tshuva. Nothing stands in the way of repentance. So powerful is repentance that in fact it can change a situation. And it is halachically binding. Let me give you an example. The Gemara in Kiddushin tells us, and Maimonides brings it lahalacha, Hare at mekudeshet li betnai, shani tzadik gamur, afilu hu rasha gamur, mekudeshet. We know that if a person marries, betrothed another woman, on condition, you have to see whether the condition is met. If the condition is met, then she is married. Now it's a big thing. It's a big thing if she's married. Because if she's married, then she can no longer marry someone else. If she's halachically married, if the marriage is binding, she can't marry someone else. She's an eshet ish. She's a married woman. She's culpable of adultery, God forbid. A very severe sin. It makes a huge difference. It changes the mitziut. It changes, how do you say the mitziut? It changes the situation, halachically. She was a second ago not married. Because of his statement, he's married, even though that he was. Now, so I didn't translate. So, if the condition is met, she's married. So the Gemara says, what happens if a person is a wicked person? He's known to make sins. But he says, I want to betroth you, I want to marry you, even on condition that I'm righteous. Let's say she wants it. She said, no, I don't want to marry you. You know, you're wicked. You know what? Okay, I'll accept that. I'll marry you on the condition that I am righteous. The halakha dictates that she is married. Why? Because at that very moment in time, he could have repented. He could have had what's called hirur tshuva, an arousal of tshuva. Which, how long does it take? How long does it take to arouse a feeling of tshuva, regret, remorse, and decision to change? How long does it take? A second. Rega kememra. Just like the second that Bil'am sought to destroy the Jewish people by looking and seeing and arousing God's justice and wrath upon the nation by seeing whether they have reversed the order and purpose of creation. So too we can reverse the order with tshuva, with repentance. That's how powerful repentance is. It could actually change the situation, halachically. She's not married, she wasn't married a second ago, she's married now. From a split second of tshuva. How is that possible? What power is this tshuva? How is that possible? Because to come to a resolution, to want to change is not simple at all, is it? It's not simple. Yes, tshuva can take a second. Doesn't need to take long. But the will, the desire, remember we said before, what's the most powerful thing of us? What stands in the middle of either going to the highest level or descending to the lowest level? The lev, a person's desire, a person's will. What do you want to do? Do you want to continue your life in sin, or do you want to repent and go up and uplift yourself? That is a very powerful thing. That is the most powerful thing that we have. But that resolution has to be thorough. That resolution is not simple or easy at all. It only takes a second. But it is life-changing. How many times have we made a decision, a resolution, that's it, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to ruin my life, I'm going to throw my life in the gurgler. I'm going to get up on time, I'm going to go to work, or I'm going to stop smoking this, I'm going to stop doing this, Life-changing things took place in a second, in a split second. But they had to be sincere. Tshuva has to be sincere, it doesn't need to take long. Just like the exact opposite, God forbid. Bilam, all he needed was a second to find the right moment that God is judging us, God forbid, by our own reason, by our own actions that we ourselves have created. We can reverse that. So I'm just going to now quote another interesting Gemara that has a connection to this. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot, those who came a while back to the Shurim, Masechet Brachot, may remember this. We learnt it. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, page 5. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, Le'olam yargiz adam yetzer tov al yetzer hara. A person must always agitate his good inclination over the bad inclination. A person must always be aggressive with his good inclination over the bad inclination. Where does that battle take place? Remember, we said before? That's in the heart. These are where the two inclinations exist. And that is where we make ourselves who we are. It is the heart that stands in between of going up or going down. So the Gemara says a person must always be angered at the evil inclination, must agitate, must do war against the evil inclination, must do battle against the evil inclination. Always, forever. Le'olam, don't rest a minute. You rest a minute, you rest on your laurels, you're finished. It's a constant battle. Shene'emar, as it says in Tehillim, King David says this in chapter 4, Rigzu ve'al tehta'u. Be angered. Rise up in war and in battle against the evil inclination. Ve'al tehta'u, and you won't come to sin. Because the evil inclination is always doing its job. Its job is to tempt us and to lure us in order to arouse our inequalities and power of strength of who we are, and to define who we are, and to be able to allow ourselves to reach the Melech, the King, the governor of our lives. For that you need to be tested. For that you need an opposing force. You can only reach it when you have an opposing force. So King David says, Imru bilevavchem, say in your heart, ve'al mishkavchem, and upon your beds, ve'domu sela, and be silent forever. What does this mean? So the Gemara interprets this verse. There are three concepts here. Remember Moshe? Remember the Gemara? Come on. Three concepts here. These three concepts correspond to the brain, to the heart, and to the liver. They correspond to the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Let's see how. If the Yetzer Hara tries to entice us, Imru belevavchem. So David HaMelech says, Imru belevavchem. Speak to your heart. What speaks to your heart? Torah. The mind controls the heart. You have the Yetzer Hara has a passion, has a desire, has a whim. Imru belevavchem. Speak to your heart. What do you speak? Words of Torah. The sanctity and the holiness of our obligations of the Torah. If that is not strong enough, because the Yetzer Hara is really strong at that time, the passion is very great and intense, Al mishkavchem. So the Gemara says, what does it mean, Al mishkavchem? Upon your couches, upon your bed? Kir'u kriyat Shema. Recite the recitation of the Shema. So studying Torah corresponds to the mind when you study Torah. Reading the Kriyat Shema corresponds to the heart. Why? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad ואהבת את השם אלוקיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך. Remind yourselves of the yoke of heaven. Remind yourselves that you have the ability to love the Lord your God with all of your heart. And remember the word for all of your heart in Hebrew here is written levavcha with two bet. And the Gemara says, why two bet? You should say b'chol libcha. Not b'chol levavcha. It's an extra bet there. Exactly the same as vayitzer with the extra yud. The two parts to the heart. Love the Lord your God. You have the capacity to love the Lord your God with all of your heart. And remember I said last week, learn from the evil inclination. The evil inclination can be harnessed. Its power of desire, its power of convincing, its power of justification is very intense and immense. Use that to serve God as well. Serve God with both parts of your heart. That corresponds to the heart. What happens if the Yetzer Hara is still convincing, is still challenging? So the Gemara says, David HaMelech says, Vedomu Sela. So the Gemara says, remind him of the day of death. Remind yourself of the day of death. That corresponds to the Kaved. The Kaved is associated with the Nefesh, life. Life. Remind him that one day we are destined to leave this world. And when we leave this world, we have to give justice before God. And that judgment that takes place is the actions that come before the Almighty, our very own actions, our very own deeds. Was it in the order of Melech, or was it in the order of Kalem? Finish him off. So how does it work? It works first. How do we work? How do we control evil inclination? First with the mind, then with the heart, and then the liver. The liver being the most basic ingredient of life. Domu Sela, that we don't live forever. We have to be able to justify our lives, live our lives with purpose and meaning. Because ultimately, the body exists for only a certain amount of years, but the soul exists forever. Well, what are we going to do up there? So you had a blast down below. You had a blast over here. You did what you want. You didn't make any calculation. But that was years given us as a preparation for the eternity of the eternity of the immortality of the soul. What are we going to do then? What are you going to do if you blew the opportunity? Remind him of the day of death. That corresponds to the blood, the kaved, the liver, the nefesh, the life source. Very interesting. There's a bit more, but we don't have time to continue. But just a very quick, interesting thing that I saw interesting from the Rebbe of Satmar, the previous Rebbe of Satmar. He says like this. I'm going to read it out and we'll explain. Le'olam yargiz adam yetzer tov al yetzer hara. Forever a person must agitate, be, so to speak, anger, arouse his anger, his wrath of the good inclination against the bad inclination. Shnei emar, as it says, be angered, be agitated upon our evil inclination. Don't let it off scot-free. V'diktiko mefarshim belashon hargaza letzarich biur. And the sages have questioned, why does it use the expression, be angry? For example, if you have a look at the Maharsha there, he has a beautiful interpretation of it. It should have said, overpower the evil inclination by the good inclination. Overcome it. Why? Anger, be angry of. Arouse your wrath and anger on it. What is this concept of anger? It's interesting. Yehuda ben Tema says that there's a few qualities that we have to learn from the animals. One of them is be as brazen as a namer. How do you say namer in English? A leopard. Be as brazen as a leopard. Apparently, a leopard is quite brazen. The truth is, I never joked around with a leopard to know how brazen he is or he isn't. I just don't hang around leopards. I've got different problems. I've got different issues. A leopard is not one of them. Although a leopard never changes his skin. So there, it's interesting that I saw one of the commentaries. So it says over there, what quality must we learn from a leopard to be brazen? What does it mean, brazen? He says, in order not to be affected and be shamed by those who make fun of us. What are you doing this for? You're wearing a kippah, you wear tzitzit, what for? You keep Shabbat, what for? Go make money. Or other nations of the world, what's this religion? What's this? What are you doing? Israel, what? You're fighting, you're killing babies, you're doing this. Don't be intimidated. What's interesting, it says, all of the other one are proactive. Use the qualities of those particular animals for the service of God. For example, Gibor Ka'ari, be as strong as a lion, to get up in the morning, to overpower your evil inclination. But here, it's passive. Don't be affected. It doesn't say, go be bold and be aggressive to other people. It doesn't say that. And there one of the commentaries says, very interesting things. He says it only uses passive because what was the word that I used before? Azut. We translated loosely as bold, but what was the other word I used before? Brazen. Zohi midah meguna me'od ve'en ra'ui lishtamesh ba klal. It is a very bad attribute and it's not appropriate to use brazenness at all. The only thing that you should use brazenness for is not to be intimidated. Don't be brazen against others. What does it say in the Mishnah? Azpanim legehenna. I'm a brazen person. Let him go to purgatory. That's where he belongs, brazen people. Not good to use brazenness. Yet we find over here it says, in regards to the Yetzer Hara, Rigzu ve'al tehtau. Go and be strong and fight against it. And Rigzu. Why that expression? It should have used the expression of Yagbir. Yagbir means to say, be stronger than it, overpower it, subdue it. Why this concept of anger? He says a very beautiful thing. And he quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin, a famous Gemara that is used quite often in Batei Dinim, when the Beth Din administers judgment. What does the Beth Din want to do ultimately? Peace between people. How's the best way to make peace? Okay, what do you say you owe him money? You say he doesn't owe you money? Okay, what's the evidence? You owe him money, pay the money right now and get out of here. No, they look for making a pshara. You're a nice bloke. You're a nice bloke. And they try and make a pshara. How do you say pshara? They try and make a compromise. Make your compromise. You go halfway. You go halfway. That way both are happy. So I'll quote it. Ezu mishpat sheyesh bo shalom. Which judgment or justice has peace? Because ultimately, one of you is going to be the loser, right? One of you is going to, you claim this, he claims no, and I'm going to judge and say, no, one of you is going to be the loser. Which justice has peace? Hapshara, where there is compromise. And the first thing the Beit Din tries to do, before even hearing all of the details of the case and actually judging the case, because one of them is going to be loser, one of them may walk out upset. If he's a righteous person, he accepts upon himself the din, lovely. But one will get ticked off. And quite often, who did they get ticked off at? The rabbi who said what the law was. He paid you off. He paid you off, did he? What do you know? Where did you study? Who did you get your rabbinical degree? What do you know? What, suddenly now you know the law? I knew he didn't know the law. They told me not to go to you. So how do you make peace? Pshara. Compromise. Listen to what he says. How is the best possible way to harmonize opposites? Compromise. However, when it comes to the evil inclination, cannot be compromised. You compromise, you're finished. You lost. You lost. You cannot compromise with the evil inclination. Therefore, it uses the expression "Rigzu ve'al tehta'u." Agitate, be angered against it, go in war and battle against the evil inclination, because you cannot compromise. Because there cannot be peace. G'day, mate. Why? I haven't seen you for a while. Come on, come with me to the beach. But Shabbat, yeah. Well, so what? You can go to the other minyan, they pray at 10 o'clock. We'll go surfing, go to the other minyan. So they go surfing. All right, let's go to the other man. Hang on a minute. Oh, it's too late now. You missed it. Can't compromise. You compromise, you'll end up getting fish and chips. And he says, if a person wants to make a, so to speak, peace or to make a compromise, he will overpower you. And you will lose. And what will happen then? Destruction. Kalem. Kalem means you bring havoc and destruction upon ourselves, God forbid. That's why the Gemara says, Le'olam yargiz adam. Always, forever, every day. You must always be vigilant. You must never rest. You must always be vigilant, not allow the Yetzer Hara to take over. I saw an interesting story. Rambam says that a person should always go in the middle of the way. The middle path. Not be frugal, but not be spendthrift. Not be this, not be that. The temperament should always be even, except for one thing. Arrogance. There's no middle of the path. You have to be exceedingly humble. So, everything that God used in the world, even arrogance, should be able to be utilized in some way, shape, or form for good. How can you utilize arrogance or anger for good? In fact, Maimonides says, even when we educate our children, we shouldn't be overly angered. We should pretend that we are angry. I find it very easy to pretend. Comes naturally. No, just joking. Just joking. So I saw a very interesting story. One time, this guy's writing this, and he said this story, and I read it. The evil inclination came to me and tried to bother me and tried to lure me away. So they asked him, his students asked him, so how did you beat it when you were young? How did you overcome your passions and your inclination? He says, very simply, I used the attribute of arrogance. He says, what do you mean? I always, whenever the evil inclination came to me, I said, do you know who I am? You know who my teacher is? You know what do you think I ain't going to go surfing on Shabbat? Do me a favor, come on. What do you think, I'm going to go and do this? It doesn't befit me. You know who my teacher is? You know who I'm the disciple of? Can't be. So to every single one of us. You know who we are? We are B'ni Bechori Yisrael. Every single Jew is called my firstborn child. The Almighty calls us His firstborn child. You know who we are? We are a Melech. God forbid that we should achieve what Bilam or what Hitler wanted to achieve, Kalem, finish them off. Very simple to do that. All we have to do is to reverse the order of the blessings that God gave us. You know who I am? Don't bother me with this stuff. It doesn't suit us. It's not befitting for us to behave in such a manner. Le'olam yargiz adam. A person should use his attribute of anger over the evil inclination. Who you dare come to me with this? How dare you come to me with this? It's not befitting. What do you want to destroy me? And then I know what you're going to do. You're going to pretend you're my mate. And then afterwards you're going to go and prosecute. And then afterwards you're going to take my life. It's exactly what happens. So as Rosh Hashanah is fast approaching, let us understand the power of tshuva. Let us understand how the Almighty endowed us with the ability to choose the right thing. We have the power, we have the ability. Let us understand that the mind can control the heart, and that the mind is propelled by the neshama, the most highest part of us, and we can even then reach higher and higher levels. Thank you for coming.